Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And this time we're taking a look at the world of programming languages.
It seems like everywhere you turn these days, somebody's talking about code.
Yeah. Is it is it just hype, though?
Or is there really something big
We're
happening?
going to try to figure that out today using some data from the Tiobe Index
Yeah.
from December 2024.
Okay.
Now,
Sounds good.
I got to be honest with you. When I first saw this, the thing that kind of jumped out at me is how does TIOBE even measure the popularity of language?
That's an excellent question. And what's so fascinating about this particular index is that it doesn't simply count lines of code.
Oh, so it's not just about how much code is out there.
It takes a lot more into account.
So what is it actually measuring then?
Well, you can almost think of it like trying to gauge the overall buzz around a language.
Okay.
So it looks at things like the number of skilled engineers globally,
Oh, wow.
the courses that are being taught,
Makes sense.
the vendors who are supporting it,
Right.
and even how often it's being searched for on Google or Wikipedia.
I, yeah. So it really is about the entire ecosystem.
So in other words, even if a language is maybe technically brilliant, but nobody's using it,
Right.
it's not really popular
Exactly.
in a practical sense.
Precisely.
Interesting. And the data shows us some really interesting things.
For sure.
For instance, it looks like Python is probably going to be called the language of the year.
It's on track.
But at the same time, there's these hints that it might be plateauing.
Yeah. Potentially slowing down a little.
That's kind of weird, right? I mean, if a language is super popular,
right.
why would it slow down?
Yeah, that is a good question.
So before we go into that, maybe we should take a look at what are the most popular languages in December 2024, according to this TIOBE index.
Sure. So at the top of the list, we have Python, which commands a 23.84% rating.
Wow.
And that's a pretty significant increase in just the past year.
Almost a quarter of the programming world uses Python.
Yeah, you could say that.
Pretty amazing. But if it's so popular, why the slowdown? Well, TIOBE points out that there is a potential cooling off of the AI hype cycle.
Oh, okay.
And because Python is so heavily used in AI development, that could explain why there might be a slowdown.
So it's not about Python itself. It's about kind of the state of the industry.
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about number 2 and 3?
So in second place, we have C++ with 10.82%,
Okay.
which is good growth, but nothing like Python's.
Yeah, C++, that's been around forever.
It has.
What keeps it going?
C++ is known for its performance and efficiency.
Okay.
So it's often used in areas like game development and high-performance computing where speed is really critical.
Okay, so it's kind of like the workhorse
Do you say that?
behind the scenes.
Definitely.
What about number 3?
Number 3 is Java with 9.72%,
Java, yeah.
also showing growth,
Uh-huh.
but again, more modest.
I feel like I don't hear that much about Java anymore.
Well, Java is very versatile,
Okay.
and it's often used in enterprise applications, web development, and of course, Android app development.
Right. That write once, run anywhere philosophy.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a big draw.
Okay, so we got Python, the AI champ.
Yes.
We've got C++, the speed demon,
That's right.
and Java, the master of many platforms.
Absolutely.
So those are the big ones. But are there any kind of underdogs that are making a splash in the rankings?
Absolutely. So Go, for example, has jumped up to number 7 with a 2.17% rating.
Go? I think I've heard of that. Isn't that something from Google?
It is, yeah.
What is it? What's it good for?
So Go is really good at handling multiple tasks at the same time, something we call concurrency.
Okay.
So it's really popular for things like network programming and distributed systems
I see.
where speed and efficiency are essential.
Okay, so while Python is like ruling the AI world,
Seems to be.
Go is making a name for itself in these really high performance areas.
That's right.
That's interesting how the different languages
Yeah,
sort of specialize.
they do.
Okay, what else is out there?
Let's see. So another one that's worth mentioning is Rust.
It's got a 1.29% rating, so it's still relatively small,
Okay.
but it's been steadily moving up the ranks.
Interesting. What's special about Rust?
Rust is known for its focus on security and speed.
Those are two pretty important things.
Very important these days.
Yeah, especially with all the cyberattacks and everybody wants things to be faster.
Exactly. So what makes Rust really special is its ownership model,
Okay.
which guarantees memory safety without sacrificing performance.
So it's like a built-in safety net for developers.
You could say that.
Okay, now here's something that really caught my eye.
Okay.
The resurgence of COBOL.
Interesting.
COBOL, isn't that like a dinosaur language?
It's been around for a long time.
Like from the 80s.
Yeah, you could say that, but it seems reports of its demise have been greatly exaggerated.
So it's making a comeback.
It is.
I don't understand that COBOL, that was for those big mainframe computers.
Right.
Why is it relevant now?
Well, it really challenges our assumptions about how technology progresses.
How so?
We tend to think that old technology just fades away,
Yeah.
replaced by the latest and greatest. But the reality is a lot more complicated than that.
Okay.
A lot of critical systems, especially in finance and government, they
Sure.
still run on COBOL.
So it's like those old bridges that are still standing.
That's a good analogy.
Even though they're old, they're reliable.
Exactly. And as those systems age and need maintenance,
Yeah.
the demand for COBOL programmers is actually going up.
Oh, wow.
It's a really interesting example of how sometimes we can't just discard the old in favor of the new.
That is interesting. It's like progress isn't always a straight line.
Right. Sometimes we have to look back to see what's still valuable.
So we've looked at where things stand in December 2024. But how do we get here?
Right.
How has the landscape changed over time?
Well, to get that bigger picture, we need to look at the Tiobe Index's very long-term history table,
Okay.
which tracks the rankings of the top 10 languages over several decades.
Okay, let's go way back.
All right.
What jumps out at you when you look at this long-term history?
One of the most striking things is the dominance of C in the 80s and 90s.
See.
Yeah, it was really the foundation for so much of what we use today, operating systems, embedded systems.
But it's not on top anymore.
No.
What happened?
Well, as technology evolved and the internet became more important,
Uh-huh.
new languages were needed to keep up with the changing demands.
Okay.
Java, for example, became really popular in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right, because it could run on any platform.
Exactly. It was perfect for the internet.
So C gave way to Java, and then
And then Python came along.
Python.
Years.
It's amazing how each era has its kind of dominant language.
It's true.
Reflecting what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
Really shows you how things are always changing.
They are.
Now I see that TIOBE has a Programming Language Hall of Fame
They do.
with the Language of the Year winners.
Uh-huh.
What can we learn from those awards?
Well, the Language of the Year award doesn't necessarily go to the most used language, but to the language that gained the most popularity in that year. So it's more about momentum.
It's about what's hot.
It is, yeah.
So what kind of languages tend to win?
We see a pattern of languages that are either relatively new or have found new applications in emerging fields.
I see.
Python, for example, has won several times recently, probably because of its use in AI and data science.
So innovation is driven by new languages or new uses for old languages.
You could say that.
That makes sense. It's
Okay.
like the programming world is constantly reinventing itself.
That's a good way to put it.
Makes you wonder what's next.
Yeah, what's the next big thing?
What's going to be the language of the future?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Well, we can't predict the future,
If only we could.
but we can look at the trends.
We can.
Make some educated guesses.
We can do that.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
before we get into that, let's take a quick break and we'll be back in a moment.
It's designed for building really robust and scalable systems, things that can handle the demands of modern web applications.
So it's like Python might be king of the AI and data science,
Yeah.
but Go is finding its place in these like super high performance areas.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. What other languages are kind of climbing the ladder here?
Well, another one that's worth keeping an eye on is Rust.
Rust.
Yeah, it's got a 1.29% rating.
Okay.
So it's still relatively small,
Yeah.
but it's been climbing steadily.
Okay. What's so special about Rust?
Well, Rust is known for its strong focus on security and speed.
Security and speed.
Yeah.
I mean, those are two pretty important things these days.
Absolutely, especially with all the cyber attacks that we see.
Yeah. Everybody wants things to be fast and secure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what makes Rust really interesting is its ownership model.
Ownership model.
Yeah, it guarantees memory safety without having to sacrifice performance.
That's like a built-in safety net for developers.
Oh, you could say that.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got Go, we got Rust. Anything else that's moving up the ranks? Or is that pretty much it?
Well, I think those are the main ones to watch right now.
Okay, now speaking of the TIOBE index.
Yeah.
I noticed something that I thought was really interesting.
What's that?
It looks like COBOL is making a comeback.
It is.
Isn't COBOL like a super old language?
It's been around for a while.
Like, isn't that what they used to program those big mainframe computers back in the 80s?
Yeah, you could say that.
So why is it suddenly relevant again?
Well, I think it's a good example of how technology doesn't always progress in a straight line.
Okay.
We often think that the old stuff just gets replaced by the new stuff,
Yeah.
but it's not always that simple.
So how does COBOL fit into this then?
Well, a lot of critical systems,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in finance and government,
Okay.
they still rely on COBOL.
So it's not because COBOL is like the coolest, newest language.
I know.
It's because these important systems still use it.
Exactly. And as those systems get older and need to be maintained,
Right.
the demand for COBOL programmers is actually increasing.
Wow. So there's actually a growing need for people who know this really old language.
There is. It's a really interesting trend,
Yeah. I mean, it shows you that sometimes the old ways are still the best.
or at least the most reliable.
Yeah, or at least the most reliable. So we've got this snapshot of what's happening in December 2024.
Right.
But I'm curious about how things have changed over time.
Yeah, me too.
Like, how has the programming landscape evolved over the decades?
Well, if we want to see that bigger picture,
Uh-huh.
we need to look at what TIOBE calls their very long-term history table.
Okay, very long-term history table.
It tracks the average rankings of the top 10 languages over several decades.
Wow, that's going way back.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so what kind of trends pop out at you when you look at this historical data?
One of the most striking things is the dominance of C.
C.
Yeah, in the 1980s and 1990s.
Interesting. So C was like the king of programming languages for a long time.
It really was. It was the foundation for so many things: operating systems, embedded systems.
But it's not on top anymore.
Right.
What happened?
Well, as technology advanced and the internet became more prominent,
Okay,
new languages emerged to meet those changing needs.
I see.
So, for example, Java
Yeah, but
became really popular in the late 1990s and early 2000s.
uh-huh. Because it could run on any platform.
Exactly. It was perfect for the growing internet.
So C gave way to Java, and then what?
And then in recent years, we've seen the rise of Python.
Python.
Yeah.
It's amazing how each era has its own dominant language.
It is. It really reflects the technological advances of the time.
Okay, so we've got this long history of programming languages rising and falling,
Right.
kind of like empires.
Yeah, like technological empires.
Now I see that the TIOBE Index also has a Programming Language Hall of Fame
They do?
with the Language of the Year winners.
Uh-huh.
What do those awards tell us?
Well, the Language of the Year award isn't necessarily about the most used language.
Okay,
It's about the language that gained the most popularity in that year.
so it's about momentum.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about what's hot, what's up and coming.
So what kind of languages tend to win this award?
Well, we see a pattern of languages that are either relatively new
Okay.
or have found new uses in emerging fields.
Interesting.
Python, for example, has won several times recently,
Uh-huh.
probably because of its role in AI and data science.
So innovation is often driven by new languages or finding new ways to use old languages.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've looked at the past,
Right?
we've looked at the present.
Right.
Makes you wonder what the future holds.
It does.
What's going to be the next big thing in programming?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
It's hard to predict the future with any certainty,
Of course.
but by understanding the trends and the factors that drive innovation,
Yeah.
we can make some educated guesses.
Okay, so before we jump into our predictions,
Uh,
let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Okay, so we've talked a lot about these programming languages, the popular ones, the ones that are on the rise, even the ones that are making a comeback. But what does this actually mean for someone who's, thinking about learning how to code?
Well, I think the big takeaway here is that the world of programming is constantly changing.
So what's hot today might not be hot tomorrow.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of intimidating, right? You could spend years learning one language,
Right.
and then it's suddenly out of date.
Well, the thing is, even though the specific languages might change,
Yeah.
the fundamental principles of programming, they stay pretty much the same.
So it's not so much about betting on the right horse.
Right.
It's more about learning how to think like a programmer.
Exactly. It's about problem solving. It's about designing solutions. It's about structuring code in a logical way.
So once you have those basic skills,
Uh-huh.
picking up a new language is not as hard.
It's not as daunting. It's more like learning a new dialect.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got the foundation, and then you can kind of build on that.
Right.
But how do you choose which language to focus on in the first place?
Well, I think it really depends on what you want to do with your coding skills.
Okay.
What are your goals? What are you interested in?
Yeah.
Do you want to build mobile apps? Do you want to create websites? Do you want to get into AI and data analysis?
It's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
So if you're really into AI, Python seems like the way to go.
It's definitely a good choice.
But if you want to build an app,
Right.
maybe Java or Swift or something like that.
Yeah, those are good options.
Now, we've talked a lot about the TIOBE index,
We have.
but it's important to remember that it's just a snapshot.
It is. It's a limited view.
There might be other languages out there
Oh,
that
absolutely.
aren't even on the list.
There's a whole world of lesser-known languages
Yeah.
that might be perfect for certain tasks.
So it's not just about following the crowd.
No.
Sometimes you got to go your own way.
Sometimes you got to explore and find those hidden gems.
So what did we learn today?
Well, I think we've learned that the popularity of a programming language is just one factor to consider.
It's not the whole story.
No. It's influenced by so many things, the size of the community, the applications in different fields.
And even though it's good to know what's trending,
Sure.
it's even more important to have those core programming skills.
Those are the foundation.
Yeah, you can adapt to any language
Exactly.
as long as you have that solid base.
That's right.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to experiment.
Don't be afraid to try new things.
Explore different languages.
Find what you're passionate about.
The world of programming is constantly changing,
It is.
and there's always something new to discover.
That's the beauty of it.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of programming
It
languages.
was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep coding, keep creating, and keep exploring the amazing world of technology.